Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Elevate podcast. This is part two of our conversation with Sohail Hanif. And we go from around 2010 to the present time, where he talks about his kind of struggle with understanding his position on the faith tradition, where he is, what he needs to understand about the Sharia. And we also then go into how he moves from where he is then at the time to studying at Oxford and then moving to Cambridge Muslim College and an eventual recent move to NZF. So I hope you enjoy this. It's a real fun conversation and really interesting and pretty deep. So please, as always, subscribe, comment, like. Here's Dr. Sohail Hanif. Assalamualaikum, Sohail. How's it going, my bro?
Wa alaikum assalam. Alhamdulillah. Very well. Thank you very much. And you?
I'm very, very well. It's Friday afternoon. So Ramadan has just been announced. So
Pretty much.
We are a couple of hours
We
away.
you gotta wait for the official.
Well, it's officially, we haven't
Post-sunset.
seen it here in the UK.
Post-sunset. Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't seen it here in the UK, but they've seen it in Saudi Arabia. We've decided a lovely Bedouin somewhere with his camels, and maybe he's out with his camels and his sheep, and he prayed Maghrib. He looked out after Maghrib and he saw the crescent moon. This is my romantic vision of it in my mind.
It sounds like as if you were there.
I'm painting a picture, right? He's in the desert.
Alhamdulillah.
And he's got on top of a rock and he has done adhan, and then he's prayed his Maghrib, and then he's relaxed for a little bit, and then he's looked out and he's seen the moon and he's shouted Allahu Akbar. Somehow
beautiful. And now we in London are now fasting.
We're not fasting yet.
Oh yeah. Sorry, we have to.
Can't stop fasting yet. Like us at time. It's not even us at time yet for me. So listen, we had a really good first conversation a few days ago now. I haven't actually put it out yet, but I'm going to put it out at some point in the next couple of days. And I just felt like we were not quite complete in our story. So
maybe it's because we weren't.
We weren't complete in our story. We were still around, as we just discussed, around 2010. You're in Jordan, and you are teaching for Sunni Path. So, and what I'd like to do in the next kind of however long it takes today is understand your journey from that point in time to now. How did you get from Jordan back to the UK? And then, what did you do while you were at Cambridge? And then from Cambridge, how did you get yourself into NZF? And I think the key bit, the bit that I really like to understand is, what did you learn along the way, right? What are the things that you picked up that you think, actually, this would be a lesson, either a principle or a practice for anybody who's listening? That bit for me is always going to be the key bit. What did you learn from your mistakes? So there's something for anybody who listens to this. And, I've only done kind of 5 or 6 of these so far. But inshallah, the more I'll do, I will say this a lot. The cleverest people are not the ones that learn from their own mistakes. The cleverest people are the ones who learn from other people's mistakes, right? So if we learn from any of your mistakes, Sohail, you are a blessing, my brother.
So you'll be the clever ones.
I will be the clever one, inshallah.
Okay, fine.
Or my listeners will be even cleverer than me, inshallah. That's the key bit. That's the bit that we want.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Jordan. Let's talk about Sunni Path.
So if I want to start from around about circa 2010, there will be some overlap because I think I hinted at some of this last time. That this did start for me a distinct new phase in my journey. It was a sort of journey within, and I guess you'll have to help me articulate it because it's I can imagine myself getting stuck trying to again dig back within myself and to articulate what it is that I have felt and am feeling. So I'll probably need your help there. But because I think key in the journey so far was this quest for tradition and knowledge. And I guess this was a period in which we've already hinted at it, I know last time, which was just that I wanted to really understand what it meant to learn within a knowledge tradition in a more profound way than I had been. I'll say it like that. And a few experiences converged in this period One was, I remember going to this gathering, like a dhikr gathering, and I remember making a dua there, so that, oh Allah, I feel really lost, please guide me. I remember there was this sense of, I just feel a bit lost right now. Even though I'm teacher and all that stuff, but within myself, something wasn't, I felt that there was, you know, I needed I needed a hand, let's say it like that. And a few odd things kind of converged. So like the very next day, a friend of mine who had been visiting, he suddenly goes, hey, I have this growth atlas. It's like a, you know, these life coachy type things.
Right.
And this happened the very next day after this event, after I made this prayer.
Wow.
And it wasn't like planned. We're going to do any of this growthy stuff, right? So it's called My Growth Atlas. That's exactly what it was. And people do this, and maybe it seems gimmicky, but it was quite new for me.
Yeah.
To write your life mission statement, but you know, you answer some questions, you make a life mission statement.
Right.
And then you write your dreams in the present tense, you know, your physical, financial, spiritual knowledge, as if it's now, right?
Right.
It's really weird, but I've never done this in my whole life. I've never formally dreamed. I've always informally.
Informally, yes.
Yeah, but to sit down and say, I'm dreaming right now on paper, I've never done that my whole life. And it was definitely powerful. I think it unlocked things within the imagination and unlocked things about purposefulness and directedness and so on. That was one thing. Nothing happened exactly the same time. I had a really good friend who was learning Arabic, and he had been a Microsoft developer. I think he worked on Outlook.
Right.
And then he took time out to do his own sort of journey. So he kind of didn't want to stay in that corporate space.
Right.
So he wasn't. So we basically read management books together. It was really weird. We did it like so he's not like a hotshot manager. Obviously, he's got definitely a few steps ahead of me, right? But we were reading these. Basically, Jim Collins was the guru. Basically, he was like the imam. And like I was reading it, just like traditional, what you see, these Darul Uloom type of, you know, like a madrasa videos you see when people are reading them. Yeah, I'm like reading Jim Collins. So I'm reading Jim Collins out loud.
Yeah.
Right. And then Google, you know, and then, you know, like that, right? And then my friends over there, and we're just discussing. So we had this discussion thing. We're literally reading this stuff as self-help. It's quite spooky. It's quite weird. But the idea was that so Good to Great of Jim Collins, for me, was an important work because, sure, it's data-led, it's studying businesses, but right at the core, it's stripping away in that period, I said I'm anti-models. Like he broke away at all of his scenarios it's not about getting the MBA guy in who's going to sort out your business. It's about getting all the models out, getting all the imitation out, and it's going right to the core of what's your hedgehog. Like the idea of Jim Collins, and again, it's an older metaphor. If it's a hedgehog is fighting a fox will have many ways to attack. The hedgehog has only one way to defend itself, but it always works.
It always works. Yeah.
You just roll into the ball. The fox can do side kick, front kick, somersault.
Doesn't matter what it does.
There ain't nothing that's going to get through that ball.
It like you can't get in.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea always is find your hedgehog.
Right.
And even the management advice, all of it was about just being really genuine in your core.
Right.
And finding that focal point, which is the combination of your strengths, your talents, and your passions. He adds one more thing, which is it drives an economic engine because he's talking to businesses.
Sure.
If you move that out of the side for now, just this idea of going really deep and finding this merging point of strength, passion, what you can do.
Right.
So there's a sort of Jim Collins story happening in the background.
Yeah.
There's a sort of dreaming on paper, which I've never done before.
Right.
And then there's the stuff I told you about last time, which was just thinking about the Islamic knowledge tradition, I think in a different framing. And I came across a number of teachers, actually, it wasn't just one at that time, who were into traditional knowledge, but they combined it with this academic rigor. They were actively in critical research. They were actively historicizing, but not historicizing to relativize. Maybe there's something we can touch on later, but historicism is a door to relativism, because historicism, there's a sort of secularism in this art of history, because the idea is every event is due to causes which you can pinpoint.
Right.
And then as you historicize, it's like there's no ideals that are moving people's behaviors. It's all, I'll have to come back to explain this. Yeah, correct. Everything is due to a cause you can pinpoint.
Right.
And it relativizes your object of study. Sorry, I know I've gone a bit vague there.
Let's try and give that a real world example. So the Second World War happened because Hitler invaded Poland, right? So that is our point of view of those two things. World War II happened because Hitler invaded Poland. Now, if you are a 1930s German who, for some reason, thought Hitler was, doing the right thing, your point of view would have been completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say historicizing, is that trying to go, hold up a second, let's just stop looking at it from our point of view and try and give it a, for want of a better word, a 360 kind of view, to say what was their point of view? If there was, I don't know, gypsies or Jewish people living there at the time, what was their point of view? And what did they all think, and why did they all act the way that they acted? Is that where you?
Yeah, it's correct, especially when you're working with knowledge traditions. To think that people are only moved by socioeconomic reasons in their scholarship, for example, and they're not moved by an ideal or or a particular, we called it the quest, your principles, reasoning.
Yeah.
Then you're going to go in a particular direction. Because your questions now are about causes that you can identify, and you've suddenly removed yourself from the conversation. That's what happens in a lot of our university studies of Islam. It's grounded in historicizing. So I've kind of gone off a bit, but the idea is that in the traditional studies I was doing previously, there was zero history, though. There was zero sense of these are human beings that embody any
what was happening in the world. Yeah, what was happening in the world.
And so what I found in this teacher, I found this whole conversation then of a committed traditionalism with a very strong academic rigor. We're really looking into transmission and text, and we're critiquing how texts are working, how arguments are developing. We're really thinking about the premises of the authors of these various texts.
So tell me one thing, how do you get from the point of learning to read the Quran to this level of scholarship? I mean, that's maybe a question that's too difficult to answer, but you went from a point of, hey, I need to learn to study the Quran and understand what it's saying, to, right, I'm now going to go into learning Arabic and learning kind of becoming a scholar. So what are the kind of steps that one goes to go, right, actually, there's all these books behind you, for instance, they will be written by somebody, they all say something, they might have slightly different points of view. What is the context of those points of view, and where do they come from, and why are they what they are? That's quite a jump for me. That's quite a few levels of depth.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I feel sorry for the listeners, because it's gone. I know I've gone quite abstract, and you're going to have to kind of help me give examples to all of this. I hope this is not like irrelevant to someone listening now, but the way education works is you have to study within a frame. It's like we do GCSE physics. Everything is like there's orbits and there's a nucleus and everything.
Yeah.
And we were so thrown off when in A level, the orbits weren't circular and actually there's a p orbit. I can't remember what it was. And then we told everyone they're all lying to you. Once we got into A level, we told all the kids, by the way, they're all lying to you in GCSE. That's not really how it all works.
That's not how it looks.
So there's something about education that you have to go along a particular line that's set out for you, otherwise you can't learn.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's why emphasizing respect, tradition, teachers, curriculum, all of that is really, really critical. Otherwise, if you start with your historicizing at the beginning, you'll stay right at the beginning with your clever answers.
Yeah, because you go around in circles. It's like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But a time has to come where you have to graduate as well, where you have to understand this was the key to a wider conversation. And you have to somehow grapple with the fact that there's a bigger conversation going on. You have to draw on what you've learned, and then you have to be willing to now critique some of your premises that you've been building on, so you can accept wider premises. Now, I know this is also vague, but let me make it really simple. That for me, the jump from what I'm going to call introductory knowledge to what I'd like to call profound knowledge, reflective knowledge, knowledge which you can really build on. It's not about years and it's not about books, because I'm quite convinced, and I say this to people, you can study fiqh for 20 years and as far as I'm concerned, not understand what even fiqh is. It's not about lots and lots and lots and lots of books are going to tell you what to do, because you have to somehow, it's not about how much you've done, it's not about the years, it's about letting it settle within you. And so the way I describe my relationship with fiqh in my pre-2010, and then the way I've been trying to explore it over the last 12 years, the idea is that fiqh used to be in my mind sentences I was passing. So whenever I get a question, I'm trying to go through things I've read. I'm trying to say, well, did he mean it this way? Did he mean it that way? It's something very much in the brain.
Right.
And what happened after 2010 with what I'm saying, some of the new teachers I met, the new framing, and what I've been trying to really grapple with fiqh from its fundamentals, is I felt I'm reading the same books, but now it's mixing with my being. I call it existential. Right. That the journey in fiqh is a journey within, because the idea is man was made to understand God's law. That's it. That's why we're on earth.
Right.
And so there's something within you that is meant to mirror this law. There's something within you that's meant to guide you.
You're supposed to understand it.
And so it's really a journey within. It's not a journey without.
So and this reminds me of our old friend Bruce Lee, right? Emotional content. That guy. So he said, he was dead against these. So first things first, if anyone ever sees me, looks at this and sees me on the street, I don't know anything about fighting. I don't know anything about martial arts. Okay, so please don't come and say to me, hey, you sound like you know what you're talking about fighting. I don't. No fighting. But I am quite interested in philosophical opinions. So this guy had a very interesting philosophical opinions. He said, hey, stop trying to learn these forms, right? So the traditional Chinese would learn forms, do this, do this, do this, do this, and that you'll learn how to fight. He said, no, that's nonsense. You need to be strong, you need to be fast, and you need to be able to do a punch and a kick as well as possible, because these are the essence of any of your forms, right? And when you get down to the level of being able to do those without thinking, you'll be able to fight. And I think there's a parallel to what you're saying, where it's one thing learning, this is the Quran, this is the Hadith, this is this is, or if this is whatever it is. That's your things that you need to know. But actually, to get to the point of understanding fiqh and understanding what you should be, you need to learn the basics of why those things are there.
Yes, that's what I said. You can do fiqh for 20 years,
right,
and not know what is fiqh.
You could do this for 20 years and still not learn why are we doing this, and what is it, how are we going to use that in a fight.
No, you absolutely summarized it really, really well for me. So it's like, especially in this period, 2010, 2011, 2012, I was trying to formulate theories of knowledge for myself as I was trying to make sense of what I was seeing now. And then I decided that knowledge, all of it is spiritual. That was my conclusion, because I used to believe that this sort of what I call mystical knowledge, Sufi knowledge, that's in the spirit. So the idea is you worship until beyond just rational, beyond physical, within your being, you sense God's being, right? Wow. I believed in that. Right. But I thought all other knowledge is somewhere else.
Right.
And then I decided, no, all of knowledge is there. And what I mean by that is, even in fiqh, sacred law, the goal is that you practice it and you develop an ability and a knack and a training so that within your being, you can intuit not just the being of God, which is what I'm going to call this mystical knowledge of, experience, but more than that. Fiqh is more than that now, I started saying.
Right.
Because you're intuiting not just the being of God, but you're intuiting the judgment of God, the will of God.
Wow.
That's what we call the moral judgment. But the idea is through a training, through a tradition, it becomes a part of your sense. The scholars of hadith I used to quote a lot in this period as well, because they used to say, roughly the phrase is, "Ilmuna hadha sihrun." This science of ours is sorcery.
Right.
And what they meant by that wasn't that they're doing spells, but the idea was they've practiced chains of transmission and reporters so much, that if they hear a hadith, they can intuit their judgment before they can rationalize it. You
Right.
sense it. You sense, no, there's something off here, but I need a few days to
Right.
work this one out. So the difference of because so the average person has this sense. As I said, it's a human journey. We were made for high purpose. But
It's
the
like,
difference between the average person, sorry to interrupt, just between the average person and the person who is trained is that they can work it out as well. It's
right.
not just unguided. If you give them a little bit of time, they have premises, they have sources, they have training, they can harmonize. But real
Right.
knowledge is not just up here. That was my conclusion.
But to be clear, we're not saying, I'm definitely not saying anything, but you're not saying that any person can make judgments and say, well, that's what I think is right.
Correct, because
They're
but the fact that there's a capacity for it, that's what we were made for. That's what I'm
Right.
saying.
Right.
The Adam's superiority over the angels in the Holy Quran was a superiority in knowledge.
Exactly.
Adam's superiority started over the angels in the Holy Quran when spirit was breathed into him.
Right.
So there's something right there between spirit and knowledge.
Right.
What makes you human is what makes you learned. And we're not talking about facts. We're talking about something a bit more profound than that.
So check
all
this
of
out.
the sacred is the key to what it means to be human. And all of these disciplines are tapping right into the core of what we are, what our purpose is, and how the revelation speaks to us.
Right. So this is interesting. So I've always had this thing where I don't know a lot of the Quran off by heart, but the bits I know, if I make a mistake, I realize I've made a mistake because there's something off when you read something or you recite something in the Quran that's wrong. And I've always thought that's the specialty in the Quran, and it probably is to some extent. But what you're saying is, hold up a second, there is something special in the Quran, but the things that's special in the Quran is reflected by what's special in a human being, because other creatures wouldn't necessarily realize that. A cat listening to it wouldn't realize, hey, you've done something wrong there. For a human being listening, regardless of their level of understanding of that, would say, oh, something's not quite right. It might take them a while to get it. But if you say the wrong word or a wrong sentence or a wrong ayah in the Quran, there's something off about it. There's just something on a very base level. You go, oh, something's not right.
Yeah, 100%. And so that's why this sort of second engagement with fiqh that I have after this period, fiqh is more than just rules of wudu and prayer now. Fiqh is a system of how to internalize revelation. That is my utter conviction. It's a full system, because now revelation has many features to it. I should be more specific, but it's internalizing what you could call the moral injunctions, the moral teachings, the guidance for your individual conduct and a social plan. So the revelation's guidance for man on earth, fiqh is a system to internalize that. Because the revelation there's Quran, there's the teachings of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, and there's a systematizing of it. How do you extract from this a way of really answering these questions? But only thing I'm adding to it now, that way is a way of being.
So what do you take away from the people who say, you know, and they're not wrong, Islam is the Quran and Sunnah? You're still saying that to some extent, but you're saying it's an internalization of that Quran and Sunnah. It's not just the Quran and Sunnah are books, and that's what they are. You go to the books, and whatever they say, that's what you do. That's not quite the same thing, is it?
Correct. And for me personally, I said something that was very personal to me last time. What's missing in this argument is the group called the Salaf.
Right.
Because the Sunnah and the Quran reached us not as books, they reached us through a community who received these sources and who engaged with these sources in the most creative way imaginable. Because the greatest creativity in reasoning and interpretation and solving puzzles happened in the very first generation of Muslims. Didn't happen afterwards. Every creativity you see afterwards is just a reflection of the creativity of these people who were trained by the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. So the Sunnah is them. That's why when I said I found within the Hanafi school something that appealed to me personally, it was this stress on the Salaf as the basis for Sunnah. The Sunnah is them. Chains of transmission, books of hadiths, yes, they're also important, but the Sunnah is them.
Yeah.
What people practiced in the early community, what people understood and internalized, they are the conveyors of revelation.
They saw the Prophet doing what he was doing.
Correct.
Right? That literally firsthand. If I see you going like this and moving glasses, I can say that's exactly what he did. You know,
correct. And then
it's as simple as that, really, to some extent.
Absolutely simple as that. And even more than that, hadiths are only part of the sunnah. That's what people don't get. Like, saying a hadith is one way of transmitting what you've learned. Sitting down and saying, I heard the Prophet say, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, something, something. So someone like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, radiallahu anhu, they say he's related like 16 hadiths.
Right.
That doesn't mean he's only conveyed 16 sentences in his whole life of his time with the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. His life was his conveying his teaching.
Of course.
Some of it is conveying things he's seen. Some of it's conveying his interpretation of what that means. All of that is meaningful for anyone observing him, his understandings and his narration. But it's not in hadiths. You won't find it in hadith books. You'll find it in there's some larger compilations which are dedicated to, again, transmissions of the companions. But then there's the larger tradition of learning. The people who sat in circles with the Sahaba, people who sat with them, that's the origin of Sunnah. So when you say Islam is Quran and Sunnah, for me, you've already taken out half of the Sunnah there.
Yeah,
and it's through the Sunnah.
You're quoting that hadith, and that's it.
That's it. So see, it's Quran and hadith, it's not Quran and Sunnah now, right?
Yeah.
And Sunnah is the practice of community.
Because for instance, things like, Hazrat Abu Bakr did things like make decisions upon where the community should go to war based on somebody else doing something, and he had to make those decisions based on his own understanding of Quran and Sunnah, or Quran and Hadith, or Quran and the actions of the Prophet as he saw them. And he didn't have let me go look and say Bukhari, right? He didn't have that. He saw what the Prophet had done before him. He judged this to be more important or that to be more important, and went, oh, actually, this is what we should do. And we don't really think of it like that. And it's slightly different because you're a scholar talking to a lay person here, right? And a lay person like me doesn't necessarily consider that at all. And it's very important for the scholarly community to explain to us where we need to be going, right, how should we do this? And where should we be going? All right, it doesn't matter what you say, we can follow you, right? I think that that's where the layperson gets lost, I think. Where do we take things directly from that source, and where do we go to people like yourselves?
I think the layperson is not to blame here. This goes back to other questions now, which is that we're living in a time of the total non-institutionalization of religious teaching, like the total randomness and chaoticness of where you're getting things from. If you went back just 100 years or 200 years, if you could travel to some other societies, the layman's got it really clear. You ask the Imam of the mosque, and the Imam's got a pretty clear sense of where he was educated. And at the end of the day, it's like the religious ministry are the ones that give the main fatwas. And what I'm trying to get at is there's a sort of institutionalization of learning that it's kind of straightforward that you're not the scholar. Just go and ask the Imam. It's kind of straightforward, really.
Fine.
For us, it's been a bit, there's two things that have gone confusing. One is the chaos of the total lack of any sort of well-known, established way of training and appointing religious figures. And certainly, the other thing that's odd is obviously we are in this mass information age, so how to deal with that? Because the common man is not just a simpleton saying, all right, so what should I do? Common man
They've
wants
read some
more,
stuff on Google,
can't always get more. And so we just have to negotiate that. But what's really missing is a more clearer way to train, appoint religious leadership. I think that's at the heart of the problem. And so the common man probably is right to be suspicious, inquisitive, challenging. I think it's almost
and we've
their
got
duty
that problem
in this
of
time, but
a little bit of knowledge being a dangerous thing. I think that a lot of us have got that little bit of knowledge, and therefore there's too many of us who think we know what we're talking about, and I think we probably don't. The layperson, at least.
So, so all I will say, so why the fiqh tradition is sacred is because it's conveying not all of the sunnah, but it is a conveying of the sunnah. So if you think of sunnah then as the larger reception of the salaf, meaning those entrusted by the Prophet ﷺ to convey religion, and those who sat with them as experts in religion, those who sat with them, right? that broad spectrum is Sunnah. And hadiths are just a subsection of Sunnah, which are transmitted in these verbal statements, right? Now, the fiqh tradition is a transmission of Sunnah, meaning that when you study, so the Hanafi school that I've been working on, which is very committed to Salaf as source of Sunnah in a very strong way, then what you're getting is these statements, all of them are only one of two things. They're either statements of scholars of the Salaf, meaning they're either Sahaba positions, or Tabi'een positions, or Tabi'een positions, or they are extrapolations based on them.
Right.
So that's all that. So it's a conveying of Sunnah in a way that's trying to fill out the system, so you can internalize.
Right.
Fiqh is a way to internalize an approach to Sunnah. So now I'm actually flipping it. I'm not saying Quran and Sunnah is how you learn revelation. I'm saying Sunnah is how you approach Quran and Sunnah. And Sunnah is the transmission from the earliest community. So Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, may Allah be pleased with him, he was one of the leading scholars of fiqh in Kufa in his generation. His uncles both studied with Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the companion of the Prophet. So talking very early. And he said, it might sound shocking to some of the audience, but he said, if I saw the Sahaba doing wudu up to the wrists, I would keep reciting the verse, wash your arms to the elbows, but I would just do wudu to the wrists. And he said, because these are a people, you can't accuse them of abandoning the sunan.
True.
Because the Quran came from them, and the Sunnah came from them, and the Hadiths came from them. So there's this idea of communal transmission and protection, which is at the heart of what it means to understand what is revelation. So for me, the fiqh tradition then is internalizing this early experience in a way that's trying to fill it out into a system, something that can answer other questions based on the brilliance of the earliest reception of revelation. And we can't go to revelation except through the earliest people who gave it to us.
Of course.
It sounds romantic talking, but that's where we'll have to maybe spell it out, how from first principles, what I'm saying is palpable and demonstrable, and it's not just a new trip, it's something grounded here.
This thing where I have a friend, Imran, who I will do kind of a Friday evening lesson normally on kind of kalam and kind of philosophical.
Kalam, you got to do a podcast on that one.
Actually, I'm going to get him on because this guy's fascinating. I went to university with him, and he's a dear friend. And funnily enough, he's the one who learned, I think, with Hamza Karamali, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, so he told me a funny story. So sometimes he'll go and have discussions with these atheists, and
Brilliant.
he said the atheist came up to me and went, do you believe in fairies then?
Mm-hmm.
And he went, well, it depends what you mean by that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I believe in a God, right, and I can prove that God exists, and then I can extrapolate from that, these were the words of that God, and that God who created everything from nothing, created you and me, created the whole universe, created animals, created fish, created the sea, created mountain, etc., etc., etc. Do you think that couldn't create a being that you and I can't see?
Mm-hmm.
And I went, okay. So what he meant by that, and actually this needs to be clear. What he's saying is, if you start off accusing somebody or saying to somebody, but you believe this, and you start off here, but the start of where they started their belief system was here, you'll never understand where they're coming from. You have to start at where they started.
Yeah. That's an excellent
That's the
explanation.
only way you're going to get to this point in time, because if you go to here, you're going to say, well, you believe in fairies. The belief system falls apart. To understand a belief system, you have to go, where did you start?
Brilliant.
Because the false belief system will always fall away from, if you do that, where did you start? And the truth ones will always go, oh, right, that makes sense. And I think this is apparent from what we've just spoken about.
Your summary is excellent, and the example is really strong. So if I can just say again why this Hanafi sort of school has been interesting to me in this particular journey was a very strong theoretical attachment to Salaf as a source of Sunnah. And the other part, I called it the extrapolation. So the other part was, how do you now build it into a system? Then you have to have some commitment to what's the role of your mind.
Right.
And so the Hanafi school has a very particular understanding of what is the relationship between the human mind and the revelation. and the basic premise is that the law is sensible. We are tasked to understand the law,
right,
and the law makes sense, and we are more sure that it makes sense in the probability judgment than the possible error of some hadith transmission. So the idea is, maybe
right.
that's another issue we'll have to go into later, but the point is, it has a very particular attachment to the role of the mind. The mind is forced to reason with the revelation, and it has premises for doing that, and it's tasked to do that. So there's a particular approach to reasoning. There's a particular approach to pragmatism. This idea that the law has to work for people is a duty of the juristic class. And so
Right.
there's a sort of inbuilt commitment to pragmatism.
Right.
There's an inbuilt commitment to what you might call a sort of rationalism grounded in the revelation. And there's a commitment to the Salaf.
Mm.
And these were the various pieces I was interested in. And so I found a tradition of more than 1,000 years old that is grounded in this alignment that is of great interest to me.
So how did you feel when you got to a place where you went, aha, this is now where I'm going to align myself to? And where were you was this in Jordan still?
So that was where, like I said, there was a particular teacher who I started studying with. And that's where I found this alignment suddenly hit me. I'd been with him before, but I'd left. That's when I'd been before, then I left fiqh. I told you for like a year and a half. I said I didn't do this fiqh thing. But when I came back, I guess I'd been on my own journey. Suddenly everything aligned perfectly.
Right.
This stress of the Salaf, this idea, because again, the Hanafi tradition, in all of its very fundamental level one books, it's full of argument. It's never saying these are the rules. It's saying these are rules because. And I'd always seen teachers jump over these because sentences, and they're more interested in rules. At least the various teachers I'd seen, generally speaking. But here I was in an educational experience where we weren't jumping over the because, but the because was actually the point. Right. And as we were diving into the because, I started seeing this text, this tradition, the very purpose of these texts in a very, very different light. That's why I said, then it started, and then I realized what I was seeing, that this was the journey within. That if you grapple with these becauses, then the fiqh is here. And I started saying to my friends, now I think fiqh is something I carry around with me. It's a part of me. Because you dived into these because sentences, and that was where the fiqh was actually being conveyed. And all I did in my PhD, I know I've jumped, but I think there's a jump that's
we need a bit of a jump
on the clock. But all I did in my PhD was I just slowed everything down, and I just tried to grapple with, so what are the premises of the system? Like, how can I show from first principle that these because clauses are part of a grounded science? It's not just because when you read them normally, they look like really random becauses, as if people are just adding a because just to justify anything. Like they'll say, like, what's a good example? Like, I'm trying to think of a good one and not a bad one, but it's like, they'll say leather has X and Y property. That's why when poo dries on it, it sucks the moisture in. It's like, yeah, whatever, man. What do you care about leather property, right?
Yeah.
Like they do these fancy, like strange arguments, and they're all random. But when I started doing this journey into the because, I'm going to say, and I realized, no, this is the science. I tried to give it a grounded basis. And I basically, for me, the PhD was just tying together all of these threads. And I felt it was really meaningful to me, that the PhD, that I really felt I gave for my purposes. When I say grounded, meaning from first principles, what are the premises of this Hanafi system?
Right.
And how is it expressed in a normal commentary throughout all of these becauses? And I showed, at least to myself, even when they quote what I call natural science, like property of leather and property of this and biology of that, it was in a very well managed system.
Right.
Science was quoted in a very particular way. They clearly had a science philosophy in when they argued science, when they didn't argue science. When they argued a social science phenomenon, they had a way they did it and a way that they didn't do it. When they argued for harmony, they had a way that they did it, and the way that they did, when they used hadiths, it was a fully fledged, fully formed, highly intricate science.
So they had frameworks there that they were using, even if
but
they
it's
weren't
all implicit.
necessarily
All
they weren't
implicit.
applying it directly. They were saying it's
correct.
there.
And so what they say is, do the journey with us. Read all of fiqh and atomized arguments, and then you will get the system, but it's not systematized.
I have a question.
In an easy, accessible way.
Is your PhD available somewhere?
Oh, it's on my website.
Okay, so you're gonna have to give me a link, and I will put that.
It is not good bedtime reading, you know. I finished it quickly. It was quite funny. What happened was, I was really fortunate and blessed to have this opportunity, which we have to jump onto next, actually, which was this lectureship in Cambridge Muslim College.
Right. This is what I want to talk about.
And they said, finish this PhD by this, whatever, by the summer. And that was like 3 years. And so I did a mad rush to finish it then. And then there was this, sorry, I basically had done it. And if I wanted a bit more time, I'd have to pay £500 for like one more term.
Wow.
And then I thought, why should I pay £500? It's like basically done. I've just handed it in. So it was it's funny that the £500 was the basic impetus to say, let's not make it perfect. I think it does the job.
Yeah, let's get it in. Say £500. Jobs are good, as they say.
So it's the £500 saved version, which is the one online. But unfortunately, I've not touched it since then. So might not make for great Bedford bedroom reading. But I'll say one thing just to show how it's interesting, that I won a prize for this PhD in 2019.
Oh,
it was the prize of the British Association of Islamic Studies, which is just it's a UK-wide body of the various Islamic studies departments. Islamic studies, for those who are new to this, it's, you know, this is part of the old, you know, there's many non-Muslims in this field. You know, Muslims are new entrants. You know, they're making up a good sizable part of the population. But I'm saying it's not a Muslimy thing. No. It's the Islamic studies university departments of the country, and they had this yearly PhD prize. People applied from in the UK and outside the UK as well, America and other places. I was a joint winner in 2019. Why am I saying this? I want to say this for one thing, which was the PhD was an answer to my personal quest.
Right.
It wasn't an attempt to write a PhD that people wanted to read.
Right.
But I only entered the PhD and this space because I felt it was the most suited to what I wanted to do, which was a free space to explore, to write, and to produce. And so I found my hedgehog here, if I can say it in a sort of Jim Collins way. And so there was no modeling or anything. It was me being me in a space where I realized how I could be me within this system. Every place you inhabit has its rules.
You have to have your own place. You need to find your
place.
Correct.
But I knew how I could be fully me and fully respective of this historical tradition, which is called Oriental Studies. But it was not anything other than me. That's all I wanted to say. And I think because it was fully me, answering fully what I always wanted to figure out, I think that it was appreciated for what it was producing. And I wasn't fully in, again, I was fully in harmony, because a lot of my colleagues who go into this PhD space, I normally discourage them. Yeah. And the reason for that is, I don't, you know, it's a very strange space. It's fully historicizing. There is no God, first of all, that could possibly be behind the revelation. Yeah. It's all historicizing, and it's all textualizing. So there's no religion that you'll get. You only will get it sucked, if anything, if it goes one way, if anything, for the average sort of the average experience is what it feels like. And so you have to really have a purpose, what you're doing in this space, and the purpose is not clear.
You have to bring the God.
Yeah, exactly. You have to figure out what you're doing in this. Not necessarily bringing God, but it's understanding, why does this space appeal to your questions? Right. If you can't make that connection, then this space probably is not going to be a healthy space for you.
Right.
And so,
how was Cambridge Muslim College then? How was that, your time there?
So so I'll just fast forward, but so all I wanted to say, this is the one thought that got trapped there, was I guess because you wanted principles for people back home, innit? So all I wanted to say was, because some Muslims, I find them in these spaces, there's still this sense of, I'm here to defend our tradition, I'm here to expose this. Then you're not really inhabiting this space. You feel like an alien there.
Yeah.
And for me, there wasn't an us or an them. There were just my questions. And I knew I would learn from this historical framing, but it's still my questions.
Right.
And that's why I found a way to inhabit it fully me, fully academic, fully in this space, without any partition of a sort of, I'm not welcome here. I've got to push something, or I've got to pretend something because that's what they want to read.
Right.
So all I want to say is that 5 years prior, I also considered doing a PhD. I met a lot of people I respected, and I concluded at the end of that I wasn't ready for it.
Right.
And I'm grateful that I made the right decision, because had I made the decision 5 years earlier, it would have been a concocted PhD of no real commitment from me.
Right.
So all I'm saying in terms of the principle is that it's better to wait until things really click within you that this is the right next step for you.
Right.
And it's really you know why you're doing it. It really makes sense, and you know that it's going to propel you in what you're trying to do. If it hasn't all aligned, then sometimes it's better to wait. And that's what I found within myself. I delayed this thing 5 years, but by that time I was so hungry and so clear why I wanted this. And that's why I said this prize is whatever, it's coincidental, whatever, but it just shows that you can be fully yourself and be recognized for that if you just take the moment to align.
That is the strengths conversation, though, right? When you line yourself with your strengths, you make your life so much easier, right? Because you're doing the things that you love, that give you energy, instead of doing things that take energy away from you, which is always going to be harder. And maybe, we're in privileged positions, and maybe that's not possible for everybody. But it's definitely the truth. If you do things that give you energy, your life will be much, much easier, much, much more pleasurable.
No, completely. And that's what I said. Many PhD students I see that, again, quoting PhD, most of your listeners have never touched a PhD, but when I say touch, I don't mean because they can't. It's because it's like it's for people that can't get jobs, right? It's like there's nothing cool about
it. In Urdu, they say, what does PhD stand for?
Yeah, exactly.
That means your head is spun, essentially.
God, yeah.
I can speak.
So, many people in that space, they sometimes develop a very negative connection with the research. It's boring. It's going on forever. I got to finish this thing, and so on. For me, it was a labor of love and passion throughout. Even my supervisor was telling me not to do it because he said, you're not going to get a job after this thing. And for me, it was all right because it wasn't really for the job. It was for, I needed this moment. I needed this time.
Yeah.
And so just for your principles. I thought there was some principle in there somewhere.
That's a very useful principle. That is very useful.
And then again, it's by Allah's grace, then this, as I was finishing this new BA program at Cambridge Muslim College started. All I will say was that was probably, I was there for 4 years. That was probably one of the most important periods of the story as well.
Wow.
Because now I was in this classroom where I've been developing my sort of conception of how fiqh should be taught from grounded principles. I can show it now, how the usul books lead to this argument, lead to this line of reasoning for this purpose. Like I had developed it. I developed my whole sense of, from first grounding, why this is the way that a fiqh book should be read, and what the output of this should be. And now I was in a classroom like a kid with a canvas. I was given very little sort of constraints. I was given an incredible amount of trust with a 3-year curriculum in Islamic law. And it's in the framing of a program which is meant to train people to think critically about the intersection between religion and modernity. Religion and modern society. And so I was able to really bring now what I'm going to call my grounded system, if you like, to study all of fiqh in a classroom where we studied everything. And when I say everything, I said from the worship to the marriage divorce, to the inheritance, to the hudud, to the slavery, to the jihad, everything, judges. And throughout this exploration, I'm training them how to reason. I'm really taking them on a journey which was so fulfilling that 1.5 years in, and everyone listening will know who I'm talking about, probably, who are in the experience. There was a student, I'm convinced 1.5 years in, he overtook me in his fiqh. Not that his Arabic is stronger, not that he's read anything that I've not read, and I've read many things he hasn't read, but there was a skill in reasoning which he was stronger than me in. 1.5 years in until the end of the course. Meaning, for 1.5 years, it was a 3-year course, whenever I was stuck, because the way the fiqh works is like in puzzle. They say Abu Hanifa said this, his companions say this, and there's a bit of a because. But some of the becauses I can't penetrate. Like, how does this because work in this chapter? But the student could get it. I'm not saying all the students. Many students could do it, of course. But I'm trying to say there's one particular person who consistently could reason for Abu Hanifa or reason for this person when I got stuck. I said, yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. And so what it confirmed was that you don't need 20 years or 60 years. All you need is a conception.
Right.
What is this
You
education
need an
about?
opening.
What is this whole experience about? And in a short space of time, a journey in fiqh is a grounded journey within. And you really feel like you're sitting in the earliest circle with someone like Abu Hanifa, and you're really grasping the argument that's behind the legal statement of do and don't do. And that grasping the argument is fiqh, because fiqh means profound understanding. Everything else isn't fiqh. Everything else is just statements. Fiqh means profound understanding. And so the book gives you the key, but you have to kind of jump in. And that's what the educational experience is. And so what I found was that students as a whole really could penetrate this. It wasn't just a thing in my mind. It wasn't just, it really happens. Fiqh is real. If I can say it like that. Fiqh is real, man. It's not like a make-believe thing. I've seen it.
So you were in this place where it sounds like you were flourishing, and obviously sound like you were very happy there. How did NZF happen?
So it's the next part of what happened at Cambridge Muslim College, which was, one was training in reasoning. That's an abstract skill. One was going through every single thing in the law and discussing, well, what does this really mean? What did it mean then? What did it mean now? And as we went through that, through all of the chapters, I realized that everything came back to a single thing, which is that all of fiqh revolves around, for me personally, a view about society, social institutions. Prayer for me is a social institution. Marriage, divorce is a communal institution, right? You need witnesses to confirm this. You have rights upon within marriage and divorce. How do you get those rights? It's through a communal institution. We call it the qadi. We have everything in the fiqh requires the community to organize in a particular fashion.
Right.
And so I guess what I'm getting at is everything was about society. Everything was not about the individual for me. Everything was about society. It was various angles to social theorizing or social philosophizing or social ethics or social coming together in a particular fashion. So that became very big for me. And I used to tell some of these students, don't do further Islamic studies, go off and live the fiqh in the world now. I'm giving you keys, build this stuff now. You know, why don't you do law, get this Western law right. I've given you the keys. We'll work together. Don't worry. You don't. Some people I said do the Arabic. I said don't worry about the Arabic. You take forever. Just do the law because you have the knack. Let's work together. Because the fiqh was trying to solve real world problems, and I don't mean answering the fatwa of one individual person. I mean a real world system problem.
Right.
Fiqh is system solutions for people. This is the bottom line. And so for me, zakat. NZF, I was aware of from 2013, 2014. I'd just come back to the UK, and just the title NZF clicked with me, as you might imagine now, because I'm trying to connect all these fiqh dots, right? And National Zakat Foundation, I thought, that sounds like just the kind of thing we're meant to be making. In this systems view of what the fiqh is trying to tell us to do.
This brother of ours, Wasim, right?
Well, at that time, correct. But my entry point was with Iqbal, whom I met in Jordan. So just the title already was the hook, basically. That I didn't need no pamphlet, no leaflet, no charts, no websites. You give me the title, and I was like, wow, this is serious. I really want to know. I want to get into this thing. And so I was close to the team since 2014. Actually, I presented to them once why I felt the project was so important. And since then, I've been close to the team. During my time in Oxford, I worked part-time in research and development for NZF, which was just working with muftis primarily about trying to how we can solve particular questions. And so I think by that time, NZF, all I'll say is I was close to the organization in various capacities. At one stage, I was asked to be like an advisor to the board of trustees. And so I've been close to it. I've observed it. I've worked in it. And I really, 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 really feel that it has the potential to really show us what it means to bring a systems solution from the Sunnah into our society. Because what it does is it solves a real problem, by ultimately transferring money. If you think about what that means, it's about helping someone in need. It's about building identity that, oh, community is about care. Oh, I have a duty to community.
Right.
What zakat is doing, it's telling you that you're part of a whole and you have a duty to the whole and the whole has a duty to you. Let me introduce you to the whole that you are a part of.
Right.
And let's go on this journey together. And so for me, zakat is not necessarily we have to fix all of our problems through zakat, or zakat's that one problem for every solution to every problem, or we have to play around. But I think it sets the stage for a very different way of thinking about who we are as community.
Right. That's really interesting. And what are your plans for NZF? Are you kind of steadying the ship and applying your identity, or are you focusing on the upward, or what's the kind of trajectory? Because this is your first Ramadan coming up, right?
Yeah, definitely. First Ramadan coming up. Tell me about it. But I'll tell you about Ramadan as well.
You've got some big shoes to fill.
Oh, definitely. I've got my little chappal, you know, size 8 chappals next to those. I don't know what size they were. I'm going to pretend they're 20, 15, 20 kind of Doc Martin type of.
The big guy himself.
But two things. I'll talk a bit about future. I'll come back to Ramadan. When I speak about the future, it ties into what I've just said to you just now, that for me, it's moving from a zakat service to a zakat system. A zakat service says, oh, hi, you want to pay zakat? Okay, I'll sort you out. But that's not the point. The point is to build a system. The idea that whether you speak to me or not, you and your home know you're part of a network that's there to care for you, and you're there to care for it by the very fact that you believe in Allah and His Messenger.
It's yours.
Correct. It's yours. It's not NZF. It's not me. There's no charity that's somehow doing anything for you. Correct.
Yeah.
It's you. You are a part of a network because you're a believer. Finish.
Great way of putting it.
Now the sunnah of zakat, we've talked about local zakat.
Yeah.
Which all the fuqaha agree to, the schools of fiqh. They've only differed on, is it obligatory or is it sunnah to make the zakat local? But everyone's agreed the sunnah of zakat is local. Okay. But one we have to pinpoint is, what does local mean? And local, I always like to say, is not the same as national. So national is a particular boundary which has its own particular history. It's very real. We inhabit the national. We follow the news of the national. We have national is real. I'm not saying national is fake.
Of the national.
Exactly, national is real. It isn't fake. But the sunnah is something closer to home. It's local. And so when we talk about a zakat system, for me personally, and that's what the doors I'm knocking on right now in my conversations, it's how do we make this a system that's a local system? Because the challenge of Quranic charity, the Quran places the challenge on the people who have to find the people who don't have. It doesn't place the onus on the people who don't have to be begging. If people who don't have are begging, then the community have already let them down.
Such a good point. That's such a good point.
So when you move into that space, you only enter it through local. The idea that in every community, in every setting,
find somebody in, I don't know, Africa or somewhere.
Correct.
People, you know.
So, but the idea of the local is in every community, in every setting, there are access points for support. And there's people who understand that we have to look out for each other. There's a sort of education that's happened at the local level. By local, I mean within communities, parts of London, Birmingham, parts of Birmingham. That's what I mean, localize. It's networks of care. That's the zakat system. It sounds like whatever dream, whatever it is, but it's doable. I've had some really good conversations. We've already piloted a product where it's another way to distribute through a partner, just seeing how we can support people in a local setting. We have some really excellent, what I've inherited, and I feel very humble and grateful again for Iqbal and those who've done this great work. Many of them are obviously still serving at NZF, but we've got these really innovative technological sort of systems where we can report exactly where the zakat went out, and we have a heat map of the UK, and we have personalized. So we have this setup where we really can track and support local networks. It's not about going back to pen and paper and like paper notes. It isn't that. It's really finding a way to harness all of our strengths, including technological strengths, but to bring them down to the grassroots. We have mosques up and down the country who are doing all kinds of charity work. We have madrasas up and down the country doing charity work. There's about more than 300 charities, really small. No one knows about them, just operating. There's a lot of networks of support already there. It's about how do we tap into, how do we enhance, and how do we make every Muslim feel a feeling that they're part of a system of care, that being a Muslim means you're looked after. That's it.
So I make dua, and I think, you know, all of our genuine listeners here will make dua for NZF, because I think it's an amazing institution, and the fact that you've taken it on is wonderful, because those of us who know you know that you're, alhamdulillah, very, very safe hands. So, you know, we make dua for you, definitely, and we make dua for the institution as well. And now, you know, we're very much close to the end of our time. The couple of questions that I've waited almost 4 hours now to ask you are the ones that I basically do this whole thing for. What is the one book you would recommend to people? That isn't obviously the Quran.
I've got two answers now, but in my, because you know, when you answer this question for the first time in your life, that becomes your standard go-to answer, right?
This is it. This is
so it. I was asked this Treasure Island question right in, in that period, 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
And a book that I said helped me a lot to think about a Salaf and Sunnah-based piety was a commentary on the 40 Hadith by scholar Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali.
Yeah.
It's in Arabic, it's called Jami' al-Ulum wal-Hikam, and in English, it's been translated.
Right, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, and in English, it's been translated with the title A Compendium of Knowledge and Wisdom, translated by Abdus Samad Clark.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, the English one is like this fat. You think, how the hell am I going to get into this thing? The Arabic version I read, it felt like, you know, the paper was thinner. You felt like, I can take this on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So don't be scared. It's, the English one looks quite, you know, substantial. It's basically the 40 hadiths of Imam Nawawi, which are really 42, by the way, for those who haven't done the counting. Yeah, it's a big scandal. It's really 42 hadiths. And then Ibn Rajab has added, may Allah be pleased with him, 8 more, and he's commented on them. But in his commentary, it's an encyclopedic summary for me of the entire Sunnah. So if you're thinking about all these books of hadiths and statements of the Sahaba and Tabi'in summarized, for me, it's the doorway to the entire Sunnah. For me personally, is this one book. That's and it's really there's a lot in there. And I taught a course on 40 hadith at Sunni Path that for which I read this book, and like I said in the last recording, it was very influential for me.
So
in the non-religion, so compendium of knowledge and wisdom.
Okay.
And in the non-religious, just because we mentioned him today, Good to Great and How the Mighty Fall were actually 2 important books in my very personal journey of just finding, I'm going to call direction, purpose, clarity. Good to Great is studying companies that became great.
Yep.
How the Mighty Fall is studying how they collapse. It's just a mirror image.
Both very important. Yeah, both very important.
And when you kind of see them both together, you can apply them to systems, to yourself, to knowledge traditions, to the place you work at. There's something, at least for me, it opened up a fair bit of, you know, I found something quite special in there first. Yeah.
Brilliant.
But it's the one thing I remembered. I was trying to crack something.
That was awesome. That was so good. You have put the cherry on top of the cake.
I don't do this a lot, mate. I don't do this a lot.
No. Wow, that was amazing. That was amazing. So
listen,
I know we're mega late.
Yep.
We're mega late. Have a good Ramadan if I don't speak to you, and Jazakallah khair for your input.
Thank you very much.
That's amazing.
Apologies for the audience for talking so much as well. All right, take care, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. So that was Dr. Sohail Hanif. I hope you really enjoyed that. Like I said, such a fun, sweet, amazing guy. And like as ever, please subscribe, please like, please comment. I'll see you soon. Bye.